basically what I'm seeing is like watching professional wrestling in politics. People are saying, look, we're going to have security guarantees. But like how? Like, are you going to post troops to Ukraine? Are you going to fight alongside, Ukrainians? Nobody's talking about that. So was that real? Or was that just imaginary for theater?
So after yesterday's meeting between Zelensky, European leaders, and Trump in Washington, everyone seems to be relieved. Nothing turned out to be a complete disaster. Nothing went off the rails like it did the previous time when Zelensky visited Washington alone. But the question that few people are probably asking is, has Ukraine and have European leaders actually made any progress yesterday when it comes to bringing the end of this war closer?
Well, that's an excellent question. When you are saying, and when other people are saying that it wasn't a disaster, that tells me, first of all, how low is the bar? So basically we were afraid yesterday, at least I was afraid, and I'm sure that quite I'm not alone in this, that Ukraine might be sold out. That was the worst case scenario, that we were worried that we will be seeing that. And when that didn't happen, it's okay. So we still have some days to figure out what to do next. But when talking about the next is I'm using an example, and I'm not sure how much you are, and I'm not entirely the fan of that, but I like the example. It's called professional wrestling, if you know about it. In the United States, they have these staged fights which are heavily scripted, and when you watch them, it seems like people are fighting, right? So they would take a chair and they would hit one another, right? And they would fall down, and some of them sometimes get hurt, and but it's mostly theater, and at the end, nobody really won. Nobody really, beat anybody. It's not real, right? So it's a nice spectacle for people to see. So I used this comparison a couple of weeks ago when I said that basically what I'm seeing is like watching professional wrestling in politics. And yesterday was like a season finale of that. People are saying, look, we're going to have security guarantees, and everybody's saying, finally. But like how? Like what is going to happen? Like, are you going to post troops to Ukraine? Are you going to fight alongside, Ukrainians? Nobody's talking about that. So was that real? Or was that just imaginary for theater, for just one day to calm everybody down? And I'm not sure. And I was upset quite a lot of times because it was theater.
At the same time, if we talk about that theater and the performance and the actors involved, I think there were some changes compared to what we've seen before. It wasn't a surprise that Zelensky and European leaders did their best to be very measured and restrained, but I think Trump was also more measured than ever. And very surprisingly, he hasn't repeated any of the Russian points, which we've seen a lot before in relation to Ukraine. What do you make of that?
Well, couple of things. So, I'm just analyzing the situation, right? So, one thing, I think that the factor of First Lady is an important one, honestly. She's coming from an, eastern flank. I think I tend to use the word that we've seen the Russian soul. Ukrainians are now seeing it every day. In Lithuania, we know Russian soul. And people from the eastern flank, they know it a little bit better than people from the west. And they are not so easily deceived when they see Russians smiling or promising good things. They know it better. And I think that, her efforts are, they might come from her heart. And I think that it was a very wise thing yesterday for President Zelensky to address her and to pass on the letter from Ukrainian First Lady. I think that it was not just a out of politeness, but it was a measured and good thing. The second point is that the reaction after Alaska wasn't probably what President Trump has expected. It was pretty harsh on him. I mean, the images, of soldiers kneeling down before the bloody dictator will linger for a very long time. They will stay there for decades. Even in this fast-moving world, because that was such a strong image and very bad image. And I think that President Trump, yesterday, he tried to balance it because he might have felt that he went a bit too far with Alaskan greeting. So I might be cynical in this. I'm kind of but I don't really have a sense that there's a major change, right? Because that would be then represented by actions, not just by protocol measures and kind words. But there might be some elements that play more into Ukrainian hand.
So one of the big topics of discussion yesterday was security guarantees that you mentioned already. And while we didn't hear any concrete plans, there were a lot of vague statements about it. At the same time, some actually saw Trump even engaging in these discussions as a breakthrough. At the same time, he has been very inconsistent, even in his language, of how he talks about security guarantees. He said that the US will merely be coordinating that, and Europe is to take that first line of defense. Do you see that engagement as a breakthrough?
Well, I think, first of all, it's good that people are talking about this because that is an important element. Ukraine has been asking for that for years. Many of Ukraine's closest allies agree that this is would be a very important and game-changing thing. But probably there's a difference in how do we imagine this happening, right? So when you talk with Poles or when you talk with Baltic countries, they would say, well, security guarantee is something like Article 5, right? If I'm attacked by Russians once again, we will be fighting together. And this works as a deterrent. Russians don't want to fight British, and that's why they wouldn't attack Ukraine anymore. But I don't think that people see it that way. So, for example, British leadership are saying, well, maybe we would station troops in western part of Ukraine. So how would that work? Others are saying, well, we have to ask Putin if he allows us, to station troops. Well, Putin did not ask for permission to station his troops in eastern part of Ukraine. He has troops. And we are asking him whether, even if Ukraine is asking us, we still have to ask Putin. Well, he will never agree. That is not how this works. So that is my main worry, that basically we are making announcements and we will go to the room and then we'll come out and we'll say, well, this is not like that and we have to think about something different and then again. Because there are options, right? So, for example, closing the skies. Also, certain security guarantee. That has been asked for since the first day of the attack. Ukraine has asked, close the skies, help us close the skies. We have not done that.
Trump keeps saying that Putin wants to make a peace deal, that he is ready to do that. And but with no additional pressure actually coming from the United States over this year since Trump took office, no additional sanctions were introduced, no aid was provided to Ukraine directly. And while Russia keeps advancing on the battlefield and keeps achieving its goals in Ukraine, incrementally, step by step, but still, do you think Putin actually has any incentives to stop now? Has something changed maybe in Alaska that would motivate Putin to stop?
Nothing. I think quite the contrary. I think that Putin is motivated to continue. I think he's probably in one of the most confident and comfortable situations for him since the start of the war. The only uncomfort that he has are Ukrainian drones that are hitting oil refineries. This is what hurts him. And that's why when they start talking about some sort of a ceasefire, it's usually, well, let's stop air attacks. from Russians. So why? Because that's the only thing that hurts. This is what they would like to stop, for Ukrainians to stop. Anything else? What? Sanctions? There's nothing. 190 billion euros confiscated of frozen assets and given to Ukraine? Not on the table. So what should be, why should he stop? If he's talking about the deal, I'm sure that he has a deal in mind, but it's closer to 1945 Yalta deal like Stalin made. Or even, then again, from history, there was an agreement between Churchill and Stalin, where they wrote down all the countries in Eastern Europe, and Churchill basically pointed out which countries will belong to Russia. All the way from Finland, all the way to Greece. And Stalin accepted that deal, took a pen, wrote a check mark, and that was the deal. So I think that in Putin's mind, he wants that sort of a deal. Let's divide Europe, and let's see, how much you can give us. And clearly, Ukraine is not the final stop, not the last victim.
And to have that sort of a deal, he clearly needs to be talking to the United States, to be talking to Trump, not to Ukraine. But at the same time, yesterday we learned that somehow Putin said on the call with Trump that he prefers to meet with Zelensky directly first, which is a new thing, a new development throughout this full-scale war. What do you think is his game here? Is he just stalling for more time?
I would bet that he is stalling for time. And I would be very surprised if he agrees to meet, because there is very little reason for him to meet. So again, it's professional wrestling. It looks like something is happening, but not really.
Even if that meeting actually takes place, and it actually from Ukraine seems very improbable as well. But do you see any possibility for Zelensky and Putin to actually agree on anything, knowing how radically different their positions are?
Well, it depends on the situation on the front. You see, the wars, unfortunately, most often are decided by the balance of powers in the front. If Ukraine can continue defending itself, even with diminished Western support, I think that people of Ukraine will still support President Zelensky if he takes a decision to do that, to continue defending. Too much blood has been spilled in order just to walk away, and knowing that it will continue, right? So that is probably on many people's mind. If Ukrainians would believe that the peace is possible, achievable, right? So of course they want peace. But they do understand that Russians don't. Every Ukrainian that I meet is a better teacher of Russian culture and political culture than anyone that I meet in the West.
Do you think Europeans and Ukraine are wasting time relying on Washington so much?
Ukrainians are not wasting time. I think that what President Zelensky is doing is a smart game. He's trying to give arguments so he's in the right place with the right words, and I think that he's doing an excellent job. For Europe, I would like to see the most powerful European countries coming to Washington with some sort of proposal, with a leverage. I will help Ukraine. Sanction packages that would hurt Putin. Something that would change Putin's calculation. Not just a request to President Trump. That's unfortunately at this stage, the only thing that we have requests to President Trump.
There have been, in the past weeks, some very optimistic predictions about the end of the war by October, by Christmas. How do you think things will unfold until the end of the year?
It's very difficult to predict. You see, the problem with the war is that so many things are, it mostly depends on very tiny details that we don't know. We lack the information. So, for example, last week's Russian breakthrough in the front, the way the situation develops. So there are people in the West who are saying, "Oh, look, Russia is unable to make any big advantages. It's advancing very slow, and it will take for Russia hundreds of years to conquer Ukraine." Yeah, but again, war doesn't work like that. One day you wake up and you find the information that that there was a breakthrough, a real breakthrough. A lot of Russian army has managed to push their front forward. They're putting a pressure on very important points, delivery points, and logistic points. And if they're successful, basically that might change the whole picture. The next day, Ukrainians strike back and are successful in rounding up Russians and basically, reversing their successes. So it's basically this is how it will be, I think. Right? So Ukrainians defending, hoping that Russians will not make a breakthrough, and Russians gaining for a breakthrough. Strategic change in the calculation. So in order to change Putin's calculation, President Zelensky needs the West. It's very difficult for him to do that alone, almost impossible. For Putin to change Zelensky's calculation and the Ukrainian people calculation, he can do it alone. Give him time and he can do it alone. So if Ukraine finds itself in a bad situation, I say it's a Western fault. If Putin finds himself in a good situation, basically he did it himself with the help of China, North Korea, whatever else. And so this is what we might be waiting for.
If you were to be at the table with a coalition of the willing, what would be your proposal to change the calculations that Putin has now?
Well, confiscate Russian money. That's the easiest thing. It's lying there. I would use the arguments that if we do accept the argument that Europe can be next after Ukraine, so not taking the money doesn't fit in this mindset. So either we believe that Putin somehow will stop, or we are just then naive or stupid. I don't know. Because if Putin will continue and attack Ukraine, after Ukraine attack Europe, then 190 billion euros will mean nothing. We'll spend 10 times more, but it will be too late. So I would argue for that, because it's there. Everything else, it's more difficult steps that require preparation, rethinking, whatever. This is possible to do.
Thank you for watching. At times like this, when the world leaders are getting together to discuss Ukraine's fate and make decisions for our country, it might seem like there's a lot going on and there's some progress being made and the war might be actually very close to an end. But for us here on the ground, the war goes on and there's no end in sight as of now. We are a reader-funded media outlet, and we want to thank everyone who supports us by becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent. You can do the same. You can support independent journalism in Ukraine at a time when it matters the most. Please consider that and hit like and subscribe, and you will feel some appreciation from Ukraine for that. Thank you.